welcome to the Real Estate Marketing Implementation Podcast. My name is Jerome Lewis. I'm your host for today. The Real Estate Marketing Podcast is a podcast where we talk marketing, tech, business, and leadership. We talk these things for real estate agents, real estate investors, and real estate entrepreneurs. The Real Estate Marketing Implementation is a podcast that has two purposes. Purpose number one, to educate and inform our audience and listeners. Purpose number two, tailor to spotlight you, your business, your service, or your product in a way that provides value to you, including market exposure and content creation. With that, we have a very special guest, Taylor Loht. Taylor is a multifamily and self-storage investor, having acquired, partnered on, or had a hand in over $250 million in real estate acquisitions. He hosts the Passive Wealth Strategy Show, a podcast dedicated to teaching listeners how to build wealth with real estate without buying another job. Taylor, I'm excited that you're here. Welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here. We've had such an awesome time connecting before we started recording here, and just happy to be with you today.
Absolutely. Welcome. So Taylor, could you please, in your own words, I just read your bio. Can you tell us in your own words how you got into real estate? Take us on that journey and let us know how you got into self-storage and multifamily.
Sure, absolutely. So at my core, I am an investor. If you go to my podcast page, you'll see that it's put out by, quote, Taylor the Investor. Since the first day I had, two nickels to rub together, got myself a big boy job, my question was, how can I turn this into more, turn those two nickels into a couple of quarters and keep growing? My first move was to pick up one of the books that's on the shelf behind me here, The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. He teaches you about value investing, particularly in the stock market. That is how Warren Buffett got his start. Warren went on to then grow and iterate on his strategy. That got me started value investing in the stock market. Did that for a few years, and I was successful in that, right, but wasn't generating cash flows and was ultimately getting frustrated by the inability to create value in that portfolio. You're just buying things and hoping they'll be worth more to the market in the future. So I looked for other ways to generate streams of income and generate wealth. And, I did a lot of exploring. Your listeners may have done the same thing. And if you go on the internet trying to learn those things, you'll find courses about, drop shipping and Amazon businesses. And this is back in 2014-15 when I was doing my exploration. Around that time, a lot of folks were putting out a lot of ebooks on Amazon of low quality, trying to sell, copies at $10 a pop. And to me, that didn't do it for me. So I kept looking, eventually landed on real estate investing. And it just made so much sense. Happened to pick up another book, yet another one that's behind me here, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as pretty much every other real estate investor out there has done. Read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He taught me the power of cash flow and business ownership. And I learned about how real estate investors can buy assets under market, off market, and improve their performance and sell them for more later while enjoying cash flow along the way. And that really just got me hooked. So around 2016, made my first investment in the multifamily space and continued to scale and grow since then. Kept investing in multifamily along the way. I started adding self-storage to my portfolio. And here we are today, consistently doing deals in both multifamily and self-storage and, just looking forward.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So like our journey was a little bit similar because I got started in real estate and I read like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then I started, oh my God, I'm hooked to like financial freedom and going out and not necessarily having a job. That's one of the things that you said in your bio too, like and how to build wealth without buying another job, because that's something that we do a lot as entrepreneurs. But one of the things that you mentioned, I was reading that book, Benjamin Graham, The Intelligent Investor, and I could not understand it. It was like went way over my head. I was like, man, this stuff is like so complicated. I couldn't get through the book. You got through the book. How did you come to the conclusion that real estate was like it? Because there are so many different vehicles. You got real estate, you've got stocks, you've got crypto. There's so much now. Why does real estate make the most sense to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. The Intelligent Investor is very difficult to read. Once you get about a third of the way through it, it becomes very hard to get through.
That's where I stopped at. About a third of the way through.
I totally agree. I probably stopped getting information out of it at about that point, but I continued skimming along the way. But I went and invested in the stock market pretty heavily and, really managed my personal finances. So I had a decent amount of income to invest in the stock market at the time. And my frustrations with that strategy, if you will, came out of experience. I was seeing the trajectory and where that was taking me, and I was, really not satisfied with where that was going. So that came out of again experience, getting that level of frustration, but looking for other things to do, other ways to create value and streams of passive income and passive wealth creation. Really, I like proven strategies. And a lot of those things that at the time were really popular in the, kind of online thought leadership space, like a drop shipping is still, kind of pretty popular, but moving beyond that, the ebook thing or all the other things out there, they just struck me as so flash in the pan, right? These things could be come and gone in a minute. If Amazon changed their algorithm or, anybody changes their algorithm, that can destroy your business. And those tech companies do exactly that. The kind of ebook strategy blew up pretty quickly because Amazon figured out that people were gaming the system to really just crank out a lot of low quality ebooks. So to me, real estate made a lot of sense because it's been around forever, right? It's not going to be innovated away. People are going to need a place to live. There's always going to be some degree of scarcity to it. And, it's been around longer than any of us have, and it will be around after we're gone. So that to me was a demonstration that real estate is here, it's here to stay, and it's a way to create that, generational wealth that so many of us are looking for. And I really invested a lot of time early on in networking with successful real estate investors in all different strategies. There are folks out there, if you go to a local real estate network event, flippers, you meet wholesalers, burr investors, single family investors, you meet a lot of different people. And the reason I talk about investing in real estate without buying yourself another job is because a lot of those folks who are getting started in the space and are focusing on wholesaling or flipping, really they're just creating more jobs for themselves. They're creating a side hustle that's going to take all of their free time and really generate an income stream that is not tax advantaged. My goal as an investor was to take my money and place it in assets where we could create value and passive income without creating, basically another side hustle for ourselves or the folks that we do business with. So it's all about creating those additional streams of passive wealth and income. And to me, owning real assets that have, again, produce a stream of income just made absolutely the most sense. I mean, when you get into this kind of alternative, if you will, wealth creation space, once you get outside of the more mainstream, you run into even more stuff. There's real estate, but you talk to folks that are in, again, you said crypto or precious metals are very popular in this space. And, if you look at track record and the ability to create cash flows, real estate's got that. Crypto does not have a track record more than 12 years or so. And it's very volatile, very up and down, and can, disappear with a flick of the wrist by the SEC essentially. Then precious metals don't create a stream of passive income. There's no ability to add value. You're buying at market, you're selling at market. So real estate just, had all of those factors that I was looking for at the time. And your listeners out there who invest in real estate, you'll probably feel the same way.
Absolutely, 100%. I just like we before we went live, I was just talking about I created a video and I was talking about that like real estate is the single best way to become wealthy. And there are many avenues within real estate, right? But I still find it's the best way to become wealthy. Price point, all of the money you make, the cash flow, there's so much that you can do within real estate. Um when you were explaining like getting started, you talked about it. So I tried to get started in like multifamily and I went out there and I was like, oh, this is not what I expected. And what I mean by that is I went out and I had came from like single family, understanding that you go out, you do some marketing and you get some leads, sellers call you and everything's great. When I entered multifamily, it was a little bit different. And I learned that it was all about relationships and networking. So one of the things that you mentioned was you mentioned networking. Can you tell us how we can effectively network and build our network so we can be successful in the multifamily and the commercial space, such as self storage?
Absolutely. I think the biggest mistake that we all make when we're new to networking in any space is we try to find successful people and then we ask them, how can I help you? What can I do
Yeah.
for you? And that's well intended, but ultimately it's not an optimal strategy because you're basically trying to give that person the job of finding something for you to do. So if you want to be successful networking in the commercial real estate space or in any real estate space with successful people, you need to find a way that you can add value to them and their business. And that's a difficult thing to do, honestly, especially when you're new and you don't know up from down. You don't know how to add value to someone's business. So that takes study, that takes learning about how these businesses work. It takes asking people questions. You can talk to experienced investors, heck, start a podcast and you can ask experienced investors, what do you need in your business? And you'll find things that they need. And ultimately, you can land on a niche that is successful for you. So when I was getting started and I didn't have experience, I had some knowledge, but it was really academic knowledge from going out and learning, reading books, networking, that kind of a thing. What I had was money. I had capital saved up in my own name, in retirement accounts, and a lot of different places from my investing in the stock market. So I started as a passive investor. I used my IRA, turned it into a self-directed IRA, found folks that I wanted to learn more from, that I wanted to be in business with, and started investing with them as a passive investor. That was my first foray into the space as an LP in what we call real estate syndication. It's a way that we pool money from passive investors and go and acquire assets. That's ultimately what I wanted to do, but it's difficult to get your foot in the door in that space. So what I decided to do was take my capital and align interests with experienced people in the space as a passive investor. That's what I did, but it's not just about the money. If you had a skill, say, in marketing, or if you're a more technical person who is really good with Microsoft Excel, you could learn underwriting. A lot of big teams or even smaller teams need a lot of help with analyzing deals. The real key is to learn what is a way that you could add value and offer that, or find someone who needs that value. It's not just about money, it can be knowledge and expertise. You probably already know something. Maybe you don't know what you know, but it takes time to learn what people need. The key is find those experienced people and make an offer to them in a way that can add value rather than ask them, what can I do for you?
Thank you for sharing that. That is one of my principles. It's like don't go. So one, there was at one point we could go out and say, "Hey, I'll pick your brain for a lunch," and I was like that was used to work back then, but I don't know how productive that is now because when you do that, that person like essentially you're telling them your knowledge, your expertise, all the experience is worth a lunch, and it's like less than $100 typically, and it's like kind of like it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So just like you, I'm like, you don't ask people how you can help them. You find a way to help them, and it is hard. It is difficult, but when you find it, it is so worth it. And a really great example was when I first started. I came from the IT space, so I had IT and computer skills, and that's what I will offer to people. I'll help you out with this technology. I'm young. I'm a millennial. I can do this. I'm great at this. Put me on front and let me do the registration. Call me when it's time for people to sign whatever it was. I offered that, and they were like, "Yeah, sure, we can use that. We would appreciate that." Instead of me just asking them, "How can I help you? What can I do for you?" Because that means now I have to sit down and think about a problem or ways that you can help me, and that takes away energy and effort from my business.
And I'll give you a specific example from just 20 minutes ago or so between you and I, as we were talking, connecting, learning more about each other. And I thought, hey, I have a friend in the real estate space who's a very experienced real estate investor. He has a background in marketing. He's been very successful in the multifamily space. And I said to you, hey, would you be interested in a connection with John? That is a specific offer. And it solves a problem that at least I believe you have, which is getting great guests for your podcast and connecting with other people who are active and successful in the space. I think you might be interested in that. If not, no harm, no foul. But if you are, we'll pick it up and we'll take it from there. So sometimes something as small as connecting to other people in a way that is productive for both of them can be beneficial. Now, we should do those things without an expectation of getting something back other than, doing something nice and helpful for other people. And on the specific example of connecting to people, it kind of bugs me when somebody emails me, even if they're well intended, and says, "Hey, you should connect with so and so," without reaching out to me first. Send me an email, and this is what I do: is a double opt-in connection. So I mentioned to you, would you be interested in connecting with John? If you say yes, then before I connect you two, I will email John and I will say, "Hey, John, would you like to connect with Jerome? Here's what he does. I think maybe it could make sense for you guys to have a call." If he says yes, then I'll connect you by email. It's a double opt-in connection. Tim Ferriss is really big on that. That's where I got that idea. And now that I'm in a position where people want to connect me with others, and that happens pretty consistently, it's just generally an appreciated thing to ask my permission before sharing my contact information with someone. Other people appreciate that, and it does add a step along the way. But if you're in that position where you're thinking about connecting to people, get the double opt-in first.
Absolutely. And like just a marketing tip for people, we always want like the immediate thing. Like, how can we get them to like buy now, as an example? But there are all of these little steps in between. And the more steps and the more yeses that people say, the more qualified they are, the more likely that thing works. Whatever goal you want them to achieve works. So by having a double opt in, it makes the lead and the connection more qualified because I've said yes, John has said yes. That makes it more qualified. So I just wanted to share that tip. Um, Taylor, we've been talking, we're here on a podcast. You also have a podcast. So can you tell us a little bit about your podcast and why you started it?
Yeah, my podcast is the Passive Wealth Strategy Show. Our goal is to help our listeners learn how to build wealth with real estate without buying themselves another job. Exactly what my mission is. And I invest in, as we've discussed, multifamily and self-storage investing, but that's not all we talk about on the show. As you mentioned earlier, there are a lot of ways to invest in real estate. There's so much out there, and none of us can do everything. We all have to pick things and focus on them in order to be successful and grow our businesses. My goal with the podcast is to arm our listeners with the knowledge that they need to help them make more informed decisions for themselves, whichever route they want to go in real estate, provide them that information and help them move forward and add value to their knowledge base and hopefully add value to their pocketbook as well.
Thank you for sharing that. One of the things that really jumped out to me when we were just talking was the word wealth. And I want to hear from you, like your perspective, right? We got all these different words, buzzwords, etc. But wealth is a very strategic word. When people pick that word, they have a very strategic and intentional definition behind wealth. So can you tell us what wealth means in your definition?
To me, I think it kind of just what's your net worth, in a dollar, and is your net worth where you or is it headed in the direction you want it to be? Think a lot of times we get kind of obsessed or we're told we should focus on just purely cash flow. But cash flow without wealth, in my opinion, is not sustainable in the long term. Because if you have a stream of cash flow, but no equity behind it, you couldn't necessarily sell it for a healthy multiple, then your exit options are incredibly limited. You can't sell whatever that stream of passive income is to someone else so that you can move on to the next thing. So, in my opinion, equity and wealth comes first, and then they should generate cash flows for us. And when we structure things in the right way and invest in the right things, we can get massive tax advantages. Real estate investing is incredibly tax advantaged compared to other types of investing in wealth creation that we can make. But to me, the passive wealth part of my passive wealth strategy show is to build streams of wealth accumulation that operate while you sleep. That's a big, Warren Buffett thing is if you don't learn how to make money while you sleep, then you'll work until you die. I believe that is fundamentally a question of or a matter of building wealth that generates passive income.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We've been talking, I'm like a big book geek. And you love yourself some books too. I also appreciate the fact that you've referenced, I got this from here. You've referenced a couple of books in your background. You got some books in your back. You got some in the background, just like me. So I would like to, before we went live, you talked about the fact that you're working on a book. Can you tell us a little bit about that book and what we might expect from it upon its completion?
Certainly. And before I mention that, one of my wife said to me just the other day that and it was one of the best things she's ever said to me, nicest thing she ever said to me is that she sees how much I'm reading and I have been reading over the last year or two, that she's now inspired to pick up books that will educate her on her goals and what she wants to achieve in her own endeavor. So that was awesome. I loved hearing that. And I'm excited that, I've learned so much from her. I'm excited that she's, getting something from me in that way. But my book that I'm working on is about passive syndication investing. So, as I mentioned before, my business model in the real estate space is syndication. We acquire assets with passive investors and split the return. The book is about how the syndication process works, what the return metrics mean, not talking about like specific returns, but how are returns measured? How are the returns split up? How do the different business models work? What are the laws that govern the syndication space? Because when you're pooling investor capital and buying assets, no matter what they are, you're offering a security. So there's a lot in there. And, I had the realization maybe about a year ago or so that there's a lot that I've learned along the way just by doing and investing that I didn't know in the first place, and that a lot of other folks who want to get into this space don't know. So I think this is an opportunity to write down what I've learned in as accessible and objective of a manner as I can and put that knowledge out there so that others can benefit from it. I think there's just when you get into the syndication space, there's a lot of like really salesy content and folks talking about how, oh, this will turn you into a cajillionaire in no time. And it's just so easy to go syndicate properties. You make a lot of money. And truth of the matter is, this business is pretty difficult and it takes a lot of time to get that initial traction and continue to grow and grow your teams, grow your systems and strategies and everything. So my goal is to share that knowledge, share what I've learned, and then, hopefully others will benefit from that.
So I appreciate you sharing that. And we were talking about your book, but that's one of the things I did before we went live. I was like, people are lying, and I'm going to tell people what the process is, right? And I'm going to put it in the book, and that's what I did. So I would like to hear from you. The question slipped my mind, but you talked about like how difficult it can be, right? So that's one of the things I do. I'm like, look, I'll help you with your marketing. This stuff can be difficult, but I'm going to give you the process. Here, you want to do it by yourself? Go buy my book, go watch my video, blah blah blah. But if you want someone to do it for you, then you hire me. So with that, I would like the same thing for you. Like, tell us why, instead of maybe going through all of those, those difficulties, why someone should just partner up with you and invest with you instead of doing it themselves.
Sure. So, as I mentioned before, when you get into the real estate investing space, go network and talk with other people, you pretty quickly and almost all the time run into people who, maybe they were lower income in their professional career. They weren't really pleased with the strategy or the income that they were earning before they got into real estate investing. So they decided to start an active real estate investing business to grow their active income. But that's not the only way to invest in real estate. A lot of my investors are higher income people who are accredited investors, which is a specific legal term relating to your net worth or income, who want to invest in real estate, but to go and start an active business in the real estate space would be honestly kind of a foolish decision because they make so much at their day job, whether they're doctors or business consultants or lawyers or what have you, taking their precious free time and investing it in building their own real estate business where they're going to make $0 per hour, perhaps for a couple of years until they start to snowball it and make money. It just doesn't make sense. It's not a wise allocation of their most scarce asset, which is time. But they have money and they want to invest in real estate. I think that is the most sensible case for syndication investing is when your time professionally is so valuable that starting an active business with your free time is just not the best allocation of your expertise and your most scarce asset, which is your time. So money, but want to invest in real estate, syndication is, I think, a great way to go.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I would like to jump back to books. And one of the questions that I have on my podcast are just about books. Like, what 3 books would you recommend to the audience and why?
This is a really tough question. There's so many great books, but I've got a few on the shelf behind me here that I
Okay.
generally recommend. One, Crucial Conversations. I forget which side that's on. That's on my left side over here. Teaches you how to have difficult conversations with people, and specifically conversations that could, if not handled properly, destroy your relationship with them, essentially, what they call crucial conversations. And for me, that book is important because I read it. I'm now in my mid 30s, but I read it in my mid 20s at a time when I was starting to realize that my ability to deal with others would directly drive my success or failure in the financial sense. So the tools from that have helped me have conversations professionally, but also, as I mentioned, now I'm married. So you have crucial conversations all the time when you're, dating and then married, right? You want to handle those things correctly and maintain the relationship. Very important. Another great one, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Most real estate investors, if you're really serious, love the knowledge in that book about how to be a better negotiator. And I'm always just constantly, going back to that book and referring back to it to try to take my, skills to the next level in the negotiation space. And then another great one that I'm mostly done with, it's a book that I'm currently reading, is How to Build a Story Brand. And that book was recommended to me by some very incredibly successful real estate investors that built a fantastic brand. And, since this is a marketing podcast, building a brand that directly speaks to your ideal client, the problems that they have, and addresses those problems is something that I'm always trying to be better at. And the tools to that are in these books and in that book specifically. So I'm in the midst of that one right now.
Thank you for sharing that. So, something we talked about a little bit earlier was you don't just ask people, how can I help you? But I kind of weave that into my podcast questions, right? But I like to give an example because I don't want you like overthinking, right? So, a really good, the question is, how can someone add immediate value to you or your business? And for me, like if I'm in a podcast setting or a situation, what I normally do is I say, oh, I could use some reviews on my podcast right now, or I could purchase a copy of my book, or go listen to this specific episode. So that's like a really good example. And I pose to you that question now, like, how can someone? So instead of them, they say, hey, Taylor, I saw you on Jerome's show, and I want to get involved with you somehow, but I need to figure out a way to provide value. So how can someone add immediate value to you or your business?
So leave a review on the podcast, share the podcast. Definitely very much appreciated. That is kind of one of the first things that I go to. If they want to talk about, investing or business, or, have a more detailed conversation about what we do in that sense, then, set up a call with me if you want to discuss. I love connecting with others. One of the things that, has really inspired me in the space recently is the folks that I've connected with who, came to me as I was already on my journey and they were just getting started, and they said, "Hey, can we discuss, whatever they want to talk about, a deal or what have you?" And then watching them grow and get into their own businesses, grow their portfolios, or, do business together with them. That's incredibly inspiring. And, your network is your net worth in real estate investing and in life in general. So I love connecting with others one on one, and want to have a conversation, deals or what have you, then that as well.
Thank you. The next question is very similar. How can someone add long-term value to you or your business?
So long-term value is created by short-term actions repeated over and over and
Mhm.
over again. So again, sharing podcasts definitely appreciated. Or you have some folks that are on my email list who give me feedback, which, sometimes can be incredibly helpful feedback on marketing, or input generally. I think the longest term value creation comes from the people that we get into business with, whether it's on the active or passive side.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to get us wrapped up. Tell us how we can find out more about you online. Where will we go? Tell us about your podcast, some of the stuff you're working on, social media, etc.
Sure. So doing deals and that kind of a thing. If you want to learn more about that, go to investwithtaylor.com. If you want to learn about the podcast, go to passivewealthstrategy.com. You and I talked about this a little bit before we started recording. I have a free 7-day video course on red flags in passive real estate investing. You can get it at passiverealestatecourse.com. Sign up and, we'll send it over to you. So those are really the 3 best ways to get in touch.
Okay, excellent. Taylor, if you could close us out with one word, no explanation, what word would that be?
Inspiration.
Inspiration. Taylor, this has been excellent. I appreciate you beyond measure. Thank you so much for today, the podcast, as well as before we went live. This has been excellent. I'm going to close us down. I want you to sit here for like maybe 3 minutes so we can catch up. Then, I'll send you on about your way. So thank you so much, Taylor.
Thank you.
All right.